a talk with Mel Witt or somebody she sends. I think she's coming about quotas and what Nova's doing with quotas, and with some of the Sender people in here, and also the Nova people about their experiences with group stuff. So just highlight that in terms of the schedule. And then we have a team photo break where we're supposed to be at the registration desk at 3:10 to go down on the pitch and get our pictures taken. So just looking ahead, we're going to hit around those things. But we have an hour. It probably would be good to move at this point to the NFS Exports Helper, because that may be a topic where we have some technical discussion, despite the sincerity. We'll see. Ben, you're driving this one.
Yeah, I just realized that I'm driving this one. Okay, so I posted a link to the actual code review. It's not that big on the Etherpad. This is something. Let me back up. Okay. It's too bad we don't have Valerie with us anymore. But when he originally wrote the generic driver and the LVM driver, he tried to share some code between them. And he wrote these NFS and CIFS helpers, which are, in theory, usable by multiple drivers to actually handle the exporting of NFS exports and CIFS shares. The way that the NFS one was written was kind of hokey. I'm not exactly sure what he was thinking with the original NFS export helper. But if you look at the code, it plays some tricks to make the exports persistent across reuse. So the original version of it years ago was not persistent. It would just create a bunch of exports, and then if the PM ever reused it, would all be logged. So he added some code to make them persistent by reading the export tab out of NFS, I think. The whole mechanism is it's racy. It had a lot of issues. So when I went to try to fix it, my first instinct was, well, we got to throw this thing away. And so I wrote this new one, which is probably about a quarter of the size in terms of lines of code, and it does everything that the old one does. And it actually works pretty well, both LVM and the generic driver. But where I got stuck was if someone had an existing vanilla installation and was using either the generic driver or the LVM driver, and we were to put this one in Queens, for example. I think I actually wrote this back in Pike, and it was mergeable during Queens. But if we had put it in during Queens, and somebody would have, upon upgrading to Queens, their system would have been hosed. So the question is, well, first of all, do people like the new NFX export helper implementation? I think it's much cleaner. Been code reviewed several times. So the first question is this a better implementation than we had? But assuming the answer is yes, then the question is, how do we migrate people off of the old one, or do we care? The generic driver and the LVM driver are both not the most production ready.
Pause on the first question for a moment, just so we can get it out of the way. I've reviewed the code and am also persuaded that this would be better code to have in place than the old code. Has anybody else looked at it and have a contrary opinion on this being a little bit Robert's rules of order here for a minute?
I just saw some sections of it, in particular the one that fixes that LVM problem that is using the NFS plugin because of export fs-u. And well, it uses that as the standard input method that we discussed near RC1 that we thought it was risky. So in order to assess that riskiness that we don't know, I was going to suggest that we should have a patch. I know I saw that your patch does not replace the usage of the plugin. So the CI is not testing your NFS export helper.
Right. Well, and that was so I had an earlier version which did change it, and then I realized there was the upgrade issue, and then I got distracted, to be honest. Like, and then I went back and solved that issue. You know, this is something we could have dealt with earlier, but there were other things that were more important. So,
could you elaborate on the upgrade issues?
Well, like I said, if someone was running Queens, or let's say someone's running Pike, and they had a generic driver and they had a bunch of existing shares, and then if we had merged this in Queens and changed the default value, and this particular user's config file didn't specify the specific helper, and the default value would have just changed, and then when they rebooted under Queens, they would have this new helper. And because the format that the new helper stores data in on the service VM or the local machine if it's LVM is different, the very first time they did an export, they would lose all their existing exports.
So you're keeping the old helper, right? And the older helper will be
This change doesn't delete the code, but in order for it to be useful, we do need to change the default to use this one.
Or have another job.
Or even if we don't change the default, the problem is there's no way to get from one helper to another helper.
Yeah, and how about just deprecate this release and not having any of those, not have the new one usable yet, and then the next release you just...
The problem is if we care about users that are using what we have now, we have to have a migration path to get them off of the old one onto the new one, or we have to decide we don't care and say, sorry, if you're using LVM or generic, you just have to redo all your exports. That would be the other option.
So yeah, so the consequence is how they would be broken is they would have to replay the commands basically to set their exports again.
This is the case where maybe InsureShare would save us. Maybe we could put code in InsureShare.
But I want to look at what would be involved manually for an operator, right? Just in order to understand that, then we can see whether automating is worth it. So manually, what I would need to do is show all my exports, and then cut over to the new code, and then enter the commands to create them again.
What the new code relies on is that the exports for each share are in a file with the name of that, with the file name based on the share ID. So it relies on having a separate file per share and having the exports managed that way.
I'm just asking, how does an operator figure out, say the operator says, oh, okay, then it's fine, go on and cut over, but I want to do the right thing myself to run with the new code. But I want to have my old exports.
I don't think you
in their format. There's no way to manually figure out what to do.
You would have to painstakingly, export by export, edit a file. It would be a mess.
It's not like
not
something one could script up.
Probably not without rewriting the whole driver, in your script. Yes, if you were willing to write a really, really powerful script, you could probably figure this out. But what I'm saying is, it's not like a simple grep or set operation.
Right. So I'm just checking. Okay.
You would have to. Yeah.
Okay. So now the question is it worth fixing in Manila itself? And so I guess part of how do we find out whether there are deployments that are using this in production? What I can tell you is that in our distro, these are not certified drivers.
Yeah.
So we don't. They're useful in the date and so on, but they have their uses, but they're not something where we're going to have support calls from customers saying I'm broken because of this issue.
We do know that people who are just kicking the tires and just want to get middleware, when you come into the channel and say, hey, we use the generic driver. So I don't know how many of those users end up going into production with the generic driver, or if those are just people that are experimenting.
I don't know if we have other, but I'm just talking about from a moment, as data So from that side, it's okay. If I had been here as one of the distros that people care about and said, you know, no, we have customers with this. This has to be solved. You cannot do this. That would be one kind of result. So I don't have that kind of result for you. I don't know if you want to check with other distros and then maybe have mail to Manila, to the upstream dev list with a Manila tag on it saying, here is our plan. Here's what we're going to do unless you object by M1, for example. These drivers have not been advertised as production ready, and in fact, we think they're significant. If you're using the current one, you're probably experiencing a bunch of issues.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say the other issue is if you were trying to run generic in production, probably be experiencing some other problems that we're aware of.
Right.
And this might not be the worst. So if we were to add this to the list of problems, this might not be the worst one. LVM, on the other hand, while not super scalable, it's probably usable.
It probably works pretty well, but it doesn't scale at all. I mean, from our distro point of view, we don't support LVM on Center. For some reasons, it's not a cloud backend. It's the point of view. Now, whether I'm not here to argue that point, I'm just saying that's the point of view, right? Mm-hmm. I'm also, well, LVM doesn't have all the races and so on that you do in generic or the failover issues. It's bad. So we're not here to hold your feet to the fire on that.
Well,
I do think your proactive communication with the overall world would be useful, and both in case there's somebody who's really, all we know is somebody's using LVM very successfully in production, and cares. Well, then we might want to reconsider the hard cut.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways to proceed. We could put the code in but not change the default, thereby making it an option for people to use, but not breaking anyone. And then
doesn't that just kick the can down the road?
Well, yeah. But as I say, there's even a problem with that, which is the moment you have multiple helpers, create this issue of them. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what Valeria was thinking when he made the helper configurable. So right now, if you have the generic driver, you can actually change your export helper for both SIFs and NFS separately by just modifying the big option in null.com. Except there's only one option.
Yeah, so nobody's ever done it.
So it raises the question of, well, if there were two options, how would you ever figure out which one to use? Because you wouldn't be able to change back and forth, and I don't think that's obvious. Like, maybe the presumption was you should be able to, but we never thought.
I mean, I don't think he thought about the idea of changing the helper would need to be. He would guess that another helper wouldn't be compatible, backwards compatible with the other one.
Yeah, maybe that was the thinking, is that any new helper would be backwards compatible, or it would just work. But again, originally when he did this, there were the rules were not persistent, and so if you rebooted the VM, you would have lost all your state anyways. So it was really.
I mean, there is the export FS file. I know you're creating files for each share, but the previous mechanism was adding all the rules in the same file, and the presence of those rules is what determined if the share was exported or not. So rebooting that VM caused the NFS server to reread the export FS file, and then.
So originally nothing was written to the file system.
No, it was.
He's saying before your time.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
So Valerie added the persistence mechanism in response to the known issue that if you reboot the VM, all your rules would go away. So I'm saying that the decision to have pluggable helpers was made before there was a notion that these things even needed to be persistent. And then when they made persistent, you can go back and refactor the helper code. So
Well,
there's just a long history.
how possible is to use the LVM drivers as in a production? Because I have tried to use the NFS kernel server and it's terrible, totally terrible, very slow. And using that on a VM is not possible. I'm just trying to say that I don't think that people should really care about that, really use that. And
NFS
I think
kernel
that's
server
only used
is
on the test environment.
It's the standard NFSD implementation on Linux. I mean, for a long time it was the only one, and people have run Linux NFS servers for decades. I mean, it's
and that was moved to the kernel.
The performance is entirely related to the how much CPU and RAM and your I/O performance on the thing running NFS kernel server.
Yeah, a kernel server can be used for production. I mean, we're using a user space one, but that's not the issue. And the LVM driver uses it much more stably than when you're running it out of VMs that Nova's spawning up.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're running it in a Nova VM that has very little CPU and or RAM, or if the back end of the thing that's doing LVM is a Cinder block device that is itself on something that's not particularly fast.
So my view of the reason LVM driver is not likely to be something that we'd ever consider as production is because it's local storage.
Well, it doesn't have
to be cloud storage. It doesn't have to be.
I mean, so for example,
if you configure the Cinder driver
for Cinder either, but it's not something that. I'm just telling you why we wouldn't make that choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
My experience,
we would have to use non-local storage behind an LVM driver.
Yeah.
There are better ways for us to go if that's what we will move with non-local storage.
But let's say I'm a Pure storage customer, right? And if Pure doesn't have NFS, but they have block storage, I could take a beefy Linux box, attach it to a giant Pure storage block device, run the LVM driver, and presumably get good performance.
Good scale out.
Right?
The consideration too is use cases I've seen for that. It's they've got the big fat storage array that's really fast. They just use block devices when they need to be fast, but when they just need some shitty shared directory that they can throw some files on, they can spin up a little NFS server.
Yeah.
It might take them 5 minutes to copy a 100 meg file.
I actually never have tried to test NFS on a very fast storage, but in normal storage, since after they changed from the kernel user space server to the kernel space, the performance dropped almost 5 times to 10 times.
I bet it's something else.
Maybe.
Probably configuration. Yeah.
Maybe we're drifting out of the subject here because
we are.
We are kind of discussing if it's worth doing this upgrade to the LVM driver.
Well, so one option is to actually rip out the old helper, put in the new helper, and just write a release note. Sorry if you're running LVM or generic. Your host.
No, I actually wanted to ask you something more detailed. I noticed that the main difference that breaks the compatibility is that the previous one had all rules in a single file, and now you have split into separate files for each share. What if we just don't change this detail and have all rules in the same file? Because I have written a patch that I try to fix that problem I have shown you, and I parsed the single file and I handle access rules only for a single share. I know it's not as good as having a single file for the access rules of each share, because it would not fix race conditions.
Yeah, that was the issue. Is you could have multiple modifications happening in parallel. You can have an access allow on this share and an access allow on that share proceeding at the same time, and they need to be writing to different files.
Yes, but do we agree that this is the single detail that breaks backwards compatibility?
No, there's other. other problems. Like when you want to be able to delete a share and remove all of its rules, it's way easier to just delete a file.
Delete a file,
It
yes.
contains all the rules for that. You have to go through all of the rules and figure out which ones need deleting.
Yes, you're back to the access rules split across separate files.
Yeah, having it in separate files is the only thing that makes sense for something that needs to scale in vanilla, I think.
Yeah. Well,
The other thing is the format of I'm not exactly sure if the format is the same in what the old one writes into the giant exports file versus this one. I don't know if it's possible to go through and split them out file by file. But let me make the proposal. Let's say we did decide we had to fix this. Let's say we were going to rip out the old one, replace it with a new one, and guarantee that we wouldn't have problems on an upgrade. I think we would have to use the ensure share mechanism.
Yeah.
So, and at the driver startup time, let the manager call ensure share and go through basically recreate, because all the information we need is in the Manila database. It's just not on the back end. We can go through and add files at driver startup time if we had a hook there for ensure share, and then the only trick would be, well, you got to go delete the old Etsy exports file, or at least remove everything that Manila had added to it. There's always a risk of some other share being in that file.
Yeah, we don't hear them comment on that.
but then that share, if it's in the file, it's not in Manila. So wouldn't the two approaches conflict with each other? Because the NFS server.
Let's say you were crazy enough to run Manila with the LVM driver on a machine, and you were also to have other NFS exports on that machine that were not managed by Manila. The new implementation would work just fine, because all of Manila's exports would be in the files created by Manila, and all the other exports would just be in
just don't delete the file. Delete the entries of the files that are related to Manila, because you're moving them to other files.
They are.
Sorry?
How do you know which ones were created by Manila versus not?
You can get the template. The template. I did that on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You think we can do this? Okay, well, so maybe the answer is that we need to use ensure share to recreate all the proper exports upon moving to the new helper, and then the only remaining question is, should we actually delete the old one so that there's only one helper that you can have? Because there's still the issue. If we leave both helpers in the code, then how do users know what to do? And how do you reasonably switch back and forth if that's something you want to do?
I want to figure out the practical problem too, though. Is it worth doing it? Is it worth solving the problem? And I'm suggesting, I think it's worth.
I prefer to not solve the problem. Yeah, it's more code to write.
Well, so I would suggest that you give people a straw man, the proposal that says you're not going to maintain compatibility. That these drivers have historically been used, to our knowledge, as for POCs and testing and education, and that we don't think we're going to hurt anybody by doing this, but we need to check. And that it go to the operators list as well as to the dev list.
Or the users list.
Yeah, isn't there an operators?
I think it's an operators list and a users
All
list.
right. Well, all three. That we air, land, and sea attack. But that we post this and give people a reasonable amount of time, like from now till M1. If this goes out right now, in the next week. And then we find out whether you need to do that.
Yeah, because what if nobody cares?
If no one responds, and then we do it, and then we find out that
When it's broken, then people are mad at you. That's what usually happens.
I don't think it's going to be.
I'm not looking at the meeting. Why it was working.
We have people on the list. I think it's less of an issue than the people we have coming on the list right now saying, all your doc points to this generic driver, and this is what we're starting with, and it doesn't work.
I mean,
and I got into these horrible conditions, and we can't help them.
I don't see the mailing list as that reliable, because it doesn't seem to reach that many people that are using Manila in production clouds. People usually don't respond or don't even send emails
To the dev list.
Yeah.
I'm saying use the operator list and user
Oh.
list as well.
Okay.
Dev list also.
But they would, if there is a problem in code, they would complain to the dev list, right?
Look, I don't think people are using these drivers because I don't see bugs coming in on them for the real issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we know how buggy the generic driver is and all these things. If people were actually trying to use it in a cloud right now, we would be besieged by this stuff. But what we get is people trying it out and failing and being frustrated. So that's why I'm taking the point of view. I normally wouldn't take this point of view at all. I would say it's a good chance people could be out there using it. But,
Okay.
So I just don't. I don't.
I just thought of
I'd
another.
rather have your work go into stuff that's actually useful than on that transition.
Okay, so
migration, just because it's a theoretical.
So that's the plan for whether we need to address the backwards compatibility issue. The other important question to answer here is, do we want to have a situation where there are two helpers in the code that you can choose between, or should we just?
What's the advantage of having two? What would be the advantage?
I don't know. I don't think there is one.
I don't think there is.
I would honestly like to remove the whole config option and say, yeah, this is the code. This is what, if you're using LVM, you're going to get these implementations, and you have no choice.
I would like us to have open source backends that people are actually working on and maintaining, rather than maintaining the fidelity to something that somebody wrote sometime and they're not around here anymore. If no one's actually using them, So if we can have, active Manila developers, pretty good, like Ben, working on it and building something that he's willing to fix if it goes wrong. That's a huge advantage.
Yeah, in order to be certain of that, we need that running in the CI and making sure that there is no risk of that standard input function.
So yeah, but I mean, as long as we merge it reasonably early in the release, we get some time.
So this means we should not delete the other one right away.
So we put on two jobs and I
was going to say, we need to address the issue of do we need to do backwards compatibility or not. But once that's sorted out one way or the other, I would like to modify this change to remove the options entirely and just have the LVM driver and the generic driver hard code to use the new helper and check that in.
Okay. I have another idea.
I mean, in the bad case where we realize that was a bad idea, we can always revert it, or at least partially revert it by resurrecting the old one and bringing it back. But I think that the path forward should be there's no optional helpers. The helpers are just, they're implemented as helpers so they're usable by multiple drivers, but the user doesn't get a chance to.
And your email should say that the code has this theoretical possibility.
But we're going to remove the config option.
But we're removing it. It's not used currently because there's only one anyway, and we're not proposing to introduce multiples.
All right. I think having multiples has no value and only confuse people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My idea would be to deprecate it and not remove it right away. But
if we remove the
don't upgrade
the config option, it's gone.
Yes.
Effectively.
Yes, like in a later release, it will be removed and will break someone, right? So I would suggest that we don't write the ensure share mechanism, and another way to migrate those users would have them running both backends at the same time, the new one and the old one, and have them migrate the shares from the old one to the new one using share migration.
So that's a possibility. So let's find out if there are users. Okay. Yes. And then that is a possible way of handling it. Is we would introduce a new LVM2. They would run LVM2 as well as LVM1, and they would migrate their shares.
I mean, it's not really another driver. It's just the same driver, but you point the helper config option to another helper.
If we don't need to do it, then we can just go with one config option. If we do need to do it, we can talk about using ensure share or using config options as ways to migrate. And you would argue for using ensure share, and right now we would argue for using the config options. But it's a hypothetical question at the moment.
I think they're two separate questions. Whether you need both at the same time or not, and whether we resolve backwards compatibility or not, or independent decisions.
Well, he's saying that one way to handle backwards compatibility is to run both at the same time, and then have use migration. That's a proposal for addressing backwards compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you don't maintain backward compatibility forever, and you have
you don't have to write
no,
code.
you don't like that way of addressing backward compatibility, and you say, if I have to address backward compatibility, I'd rather use ensure share to do it and just take them over.
I don't like.
What I'm suggesting is that we can defer that debate until we know whether we even need to deal with it.
I don't like the end state where you have two different options.
I understand.
And so it seems like the sooner we remove that and say, look, there are no, the helper is just an implementation, so I'm not a choice.
I understand. Both of you want to settle the issue between you now. I don't want to.
Okay.
I want to say, let's just find out, do we even need to settle it? Or is it,
No,
going to be
we have to make that decision.
No, we have to make the decision of, are we going to handle backward compatibility?
Let's
And
send
the
the
question
email.
is how we would handle it if we need to.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't need to, then we don't even have to figure it. You guys are welcome to debate it.
Send the
But we
email
as a
first.
community don't need to figure it out. And we don't need to have you.
we're not communicating.
Okay.
Yes, we have to answer the question, do we need backwards compatibility or not? Before we answer that, we could still decide, regardless of whether we do or not, we don't want to end up in a state where we have two of these, an option for the helper. And say,
Or we could say, we don't have agreement on that, so you and Rodrigo don't agree on that. So do we need to have you agree on that? No. We do it, we might have to get you guys to agree on it, but we don't have to right now because we might not even have to do the backward compatibility. In which case you'll get your desired result. There'll only be one there, and Rodrigo won't care because he doesn't have that issue. You want to know the truth. I mean, about the best design. And I'm just saying, well, if we don't have to design that part.
I'm saying we could make that
much.
decision today and then pursue
We could.
other questions separately. And you want to find out both. That's okay.
I want to find the data. Is anybody actually using this stuff? Now, the risk there is that we won't get the true answer. But we have that risk no matter
I'm saying
what.
whether
Unless we over-design and get a solution for something that we probably don't even need to do, then we have that risk, which is that if all we can do is do our best to communicate and find out.
So my thinking is whether people are using it or not, I want to remove the old one.
I know you do. You might or might not be able to. No. But you'll only be able to do it by a lot more work.
I don't know if it's a lot more work.
Okay. All right. Well, if you want to code up and share solution between now and Friday and slam dunk that, we can do that too.
Maybe that's one option. Just figure out what would be involved to do with insurance sharing.
Yeah, and where you have that is say, okay, it's not a lot of work. I'm just going to go on and deal with it, and then I don't have to send an email to the community. You might still need to send email saying they are going to get the share converted.
If we actually figure out a way to get the best of both worlds where we only have one helper and we don't break anyone on upgrade, then we wouldn't have to go bugging anyone about this.
We're setting the incentives here for Ben to just figure it out. Either that or you just got to send an email.
Yeah, in order to do that, you will need to parse the old export file.
I share your suspicion that the right people aren't listening.
That's his suspicion.
Or I share Rodrigo's suspicion that the right people aren't listening.
Okay, but it seems to me we've got agreement that maybe not on, we've got agreement on a way to move forward here. which has either Ben's going to have to come up with a slick solution, or he's going to have to send an email. And then, if depending on the results, we have another conversation at that point. All right. Is there anything else we want to talk about before lunch? Okay, if you see Melowet, say thanks for coming by right after the meeting. Let us politely remind her that she's going to be here. I will do the same.
One question is there anything, I mean, we're obviously overflowing this room. Is there something we can do to get more space, get more chairs?
I don't want to jinx it by getting a whole bunch more chairs and have nobody be here.
After lunch and they're all gone.
I think we could ask for more power outlets, like that.
Are we running out of that?
More
I can do
chair.
that. I can see if I can get more power outlets.
There's power outlet down there. It's not gonna-
There's one.
I have another splitter if we need.
And I can take my phone out of one now if somebody needs. But yeah, let me try to get some more power outlets.
What happened to the chairs? They died in electric.
We haven't seen my attic.
Yeah.
Power.
Okay, yeah, I'll see if we can get some more chairs and power.
Okay.
And we gather again at what hour?
1:30 is.
Okay. Okay, so come back up here at 1:30, please, and we'll start, and we'll have some interesting stuff to talk about with quotas.
Okay.
And also, Trivisa.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you, Ramona, for doing that.
What time are we back?
1:30.
Still here.
Okay.
I got them.
Hey, Gotham, anything to add before we?
See you guys after lunch.
Okay.
Hopefully, if I don't fall asleep.
Isn't the door